Hello everyone, this is 214 Midterm Review, and I will go through our very first lecture and review them. Uh, so before we go through the actual topics that we covered in our first lecture, I will talk about midterm tips and then talk about data structures, ADT, vector struct, and stuff. So for midterm, I suggest that you should be able to verbally explain how each data structure and its operations work. And also you should be able to write them down in the code. And I would suggest doing homework 3 before the exam might help. Also, you should be able to explain their runtime, and you should know what are their pros and cons, like what makes singly linked lists better than vector and something like that. And we can discuss that later. So what is a data structure? So data structure is we just store data in it, and it has operations based on your need, and it can also represent the data, in a structured manner. So it's useful in terms of organizing data. So the goals of data structure is your operations has to they have to perform a desired task, and the efficiency is also important, like their runtime. So ADT is abstract data types, and ADTs always has their trade-offs. So we can discuss the trade-offs later in the second review. So vectors, yeah. So vectors is basically a sequence of data, and vector is basically similar to the array, but the problem of vector is that when you double the size of the vector, you have to copy everything, and you have to add the new element at the end. So that takes of and runtime, and that causes amortized of1 runtime. So vector is somewhat inefficient in terms of adding the new element, which is over its fixed capacity size. So I briefly discussed the vector runtime. So there are two types, sorted vector and unsorted vector. So for add method, which is indexing method, we can literally have a index and index it. So that's just O of 1 for both. It's a constant time. And insertion takes O of n, of course, because we need to make a space in between and push through the element and insert it into the middle. And removing is same for that, because once we remove the element, we have to fill it up the empty space and remove that empty space. So we need an array copy essentially. So that's why it is of n runtime. And find is basically looking it up. And for the unsorted list, we need to iterate through every single element. But then in case of sorted element, we can apply such as binary search, so that's why it takes logarithmic time. In case of pushback, this is the one that I just talked about, the amortized of 1, because we need to double the capacity and copy all the element and push it back. That's why it takes of n in some cases, but in general it is of 1 where there's an empty capacity at the back. That's why it's amortized to O of 1. I believe we covered this array copying, adding a new element in homework 1. So if you don't quite understand what I'm talking about, you may refer to your homework 1 code to see how it works. And then yeah, you will pretty much realize why it's O of n. And then structs. Structs is basically a where you could store your data. So yes, it is a collection of data, and we can store several things into one chunk, and that's what we call as structs. And box identity. So it's talking about its arrowing and pointer thing. So what it's saying is two arrows can point to the same box, and that makes sense. Here, 3, 7, it's pointing to the same box. And a change through one arrow can be seen through the other. So let's say we change, we are pointing to the same box in 3 and 7. Let's say this left pointer with using the left pointer, let's say I changed y value into 17, and then that means that this right pointer, which is pointing to the same exact box, could also realize that this y value has changed into 17. So this is what it basically talks about here. A change through one arrow can be seen through the other. So classes is basically structs with methods. So I mean, we've been doing, a lot of programming like inside classes in our homework 1 and 2, so I'm pretty sure you guys are like now familiar with how classes work and like how object-oriented programming works. So contracts is basically like they check your types. So in Python and DSSL2, they don't really have like types in front of like the variable. For example, in Java and C, like you have to put like double something or like int something. But then in DSSL2, we don't do that. So that's why we need such like contracts to check it out. So like for example, here we check like int question mark and like NAT, the natural number question mark, something like that, to check it out whether the element got the same type that you desire to be in. So that's pretty much it for the first lecture review, and I'll see you on the second review video.